Welcome into the September 15th episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. It is game day for the Maple Leafs, ladies and gentlemen. Dave, we got a game tonight that we could watch. It is at the Prospect Tournament, so not quite the big leagues, but the Prospect Tournament begins today in Traverse City. Dave and I will preview the game a little bit, tell you about the top 5 guys we'll be watching this weekend at the tournament. Also, Dave, you got to give us a little snippet of You Make My Dreams Come True on the piano. Yesterday, we talked about it. You said tomorrow's show is here, my friend, and you are living up to that. You're going to do it in just a little bit. But I'm excited for today's show, so you'll definitely want to stick around to hear that. All that and more coming up on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. You can also now catch us up on video format up on YouTube. Just search up Locked On Leafs, and please hit subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you got anything that you want to ask us, say to us. You got some questions, you want to follow up to what we talk about, or just simply you have a different opinion, throw that in the comment section down below. We really appreciate it, each and every comment that we get, good and bad, to be honest with you. So just comment down below. We got a game day today, David. The Leafs Prospect Tournament kicks off down in Traverse City. They'll be taking on the Dallas Stars. That'll be a 6:30 p.m. Eastern game, and looks like you can watch it. They're going to be streaming the Leafs broadcast through the Toronto Maple Leafs app. So if you don't have the app, download it and you can watch the game. Sounds like Todd Crocker is going to be the play-by-play voice for the game. And then it seems as though if you want to watch it also on YouTube, the opponents, so Dallas, looking like they're going to have their own little broadcast. That'll be on YouTube. But for Leafs perspective, to hear Todd Crocker, the Marlies guy, download the Maple Leafs app and you'll be able to watch the game tonight. So that might be how I might be tuning into the game. You excited for this one? You excited to finally get to watch, a little bit of Maple Leafs hockey after not watching it for a few months here, Dave?
Yeah, it's gonna be. I'm gonna find it a little weird at first to think like we're trying to get it back into the NHL mindset in September. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to seeing some. I mean, we've been waiting for the. I mean, this tournament is usually around this time, so I remember my first time going to one was out in London.
Yes.
When the Leafs used to host it in London, it was our Leafs. I believe it was the Leafs. At that time, I think it was Nylander was there at the tournament. I'm just trying
I wonder if we were at the same game, because this was before. It was before you and I guess, started school together at Centennial. But when I was living in London, I was able to go out to a couple of games too. I want to say it would have been like fall of 2015 or so. It sounds about right for when those tournaments, when the tournament was held in London. Does that sound about right to you?
I'm just thinking, yeah, it might have been earlier than that. I just remember driving, and this was like one of the first times I actually made a long trek out. I drove all the way to London, watched the game, and I came all the way back to Toronto the same day. Do not recommend that, by the way.
I remember in that game that I watched, Martin Zirkles. Remember that guy? Martin's Zirkles looked like he was going to be a player. I was like, oh, this guy looks all right. Didn't pan out. No, it just didn't happen for whatever reason. So, guys might look stellar tonight and they don't end up, becoming anything. But, I'm still, it's still going to be nice because there are some really talented players. And we're going to go over our top 5 players that we're going to be watching in this tournament in just a little bit. But before we get there, we were discussing it yesterday, how we were a little surprised that Mikhail Abramov is not at the tournament. And of course, just, as per usual, maybe a half hour afterwards, after we finish recording, we got our answer. So we're just going to now relay it to you guys. The reason why he's not playing is because he wasn't cleared to play. He had an off-season injury, and he still is not ready to go. So that is why Mikhail Abramov will not be here, but they're hoping that he should be ready to go at some point through main camp, just not going to be at this rookie tournament. Why don't we pull up the lines as well, Dave? Because a friend of the show, technically, despite the spotty internet connection, but friend of the show, David Alter.
Remind me about that one. Thank you, Mike.
Sorry to bury you on that one, pal. But I don't know if he's down in Traverse City. Potentially could be. He typically travels with the team. But he was watching them practice today. And if you're watching on YouTube, here are the practice lines that the Maple Leafs had. By the way, Manny Malhotra, the head coach at this tournament for the Maple Leafs. So he's getting some head coaching, I guess, I don't know what you want to experience, I guess, in this tournament here, which is kind of cool for him. But this is what it looks like. So the top line is going to be Alex Steeves, who's a player that we know, a player that, we saw had a cup of coffee in the NHL, played mostly in the American League last year. Fraser Minton, who was a second-round pick this past season. And then obviously Nick Robertson, one of the Leafs' top prospects from a couple of years back. He's going to be the top dog here at the prospect tournament for the Maple Leafs, and that's going to make up your top line. Nick Abruzzese is going to be on the second line. Curtis Douglas and SDA, not even going to try and say the last name. We all know that everybody butchers it. So SDA works, and that's what everybody knows him as. Max Ellis, Holmberg, and Gogolev are going to comprise a line. Lazowski, Slaggert, and Voigt will be a line. Then Hayes, Femus, and McGurn on the blue line. Philip Kral will be with William Villeneuve. So I'm actually intrigued by that pairing for sure. Two guys who I think have some NHL talent and could potentially get there in the next couple of years and, be some depth for this blue line. Mikko Kokkonen, Alex Rendell, your guy, Van Vliet is going to be on a pair with Larson, and then Refi and Joe Miller also looking like they're going to be the pairing themselves at some point this weekend. And then we know that there's the trio of goaltenders led by Keith Petruzzelli as well. So those are the lineups and the players that will be playing this weekend. And of these guys, Dave and I have comprised a list of the top 5 players who we are excited to watch. And we're going to tell you who those players are in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors, and that's BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, NHL, MMA, boxing, even golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano, host of Locked On Leafs, along with my co-host Dave Morassutti. So Dave, how do you want to do this? We'll go back and forth. I guess we'll go 1 through 5. So the guy who we're most excited to watch at this tournament, and we can kind of go back and forth with our top 5 list here. Why don't you kick things off? Who are you most excited to watch and why?
All right, so I'll pull up our list right now, and the reason why I'm pulling it up is because you and I got the same player.
Yep.
At number 1, Nick Robertson. We've been talking the last 2 months about Nick Robertson and what we're expecting of him going into the season. This is the first chance we get to see Nick Robertson in action, and he's the guy going into this tournament. Everyone's eyes are going to be on him. And I think that's a good thing for him because this is a chance for him to show that the spotlight won't be too bright for him. That's what we need. I'm looking to see from him going into this tournament.
Yeah, my man, THIKK Nick. THIKK Nick, I don't know if you heard these comments. We'll play them for you guys in just a moment here, but apparently put on some weight up to about 185 right now. And he said he's got a little bit of thickness added to his legs and his upper body. And I think that we now need to start calling young Nick Robertson Thick Nick. That's what we're going to refer to him from now on the show, David. Thick Nick. And he's number one on my list, too, obviously. You look at the year that he had last year, wasn't, it was a little disappointing, I suppose, from an NHL perspective. Just scored the lone goal in 10 games. I think I was at the game he scored, actually. It was against Vancouver where he scored that goal. But just one goal, I think he wanted a little bit more. He got some action in the top six in the second line, but spent the majority of it in the bottom six. And that's not really the role that's going to work for him, in my opinion. But starting out at this tournament with a good showing, getting his legs underneath him, getting his shot NHL ready, ramped up, I suppose, for the time main camp comes. It's going to lend himself the best opportunity to perform at main camp. He'll have a couple of games, under his belt by the time he gets to Leafs training camp, and he'll be a little bit more energized, maybe a little bit more ready to go than some of the other guys, and a chance for him to earn an actual roster spot this season, which I know that he'll be gunning for and aiming for. And he had a great end of the year last season once he did go down to the Marlies and started to play some more games. 16 goals, 28 points in 28 games. Pretty good for a 20-year-old kid. He just turned 21. So Nick Robertson, no doubt about it, is the guy who I think both of us are going to be keeping an eye on, and we're most excited to watch at this tournament. And do we want to play the Nick Robertson post or sound today? So, okay, let's play it. So Robertson met with the media today after their morning skate, after their practice, and this is what he had to say.
Summer's over. Good to be back on the ice.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It went by fast, but I'm definitely excited to be here.
What can you get out of this camp?
Well, just some game reps. I think I've been off for about 3 months or so, and definitely want to be in game shape when it really matters, going to preseason and going to camp for the Leafs.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good. I mean, I felt I got into Toronto on Sunday and got some more reps, with the guys and everything, so I feel pretty good.
What do you think are your chances of cracking the Leafs lineup out of camp this year?
I mean, I think you have to ask Kiefer about that. I mean, I think for me, it's just doing what I can and just playing the way I can. And I think, I know I'm confident in myself that I am that caliber player to play in the Leafs and see how it goes.
Is this a bit of a reset for you, Nick, given the injuries and everything that's happened in the past few years for you? How do you see it?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I was in the same situation last year and I got hurt again. So I guess you could say I reset it last year and I got injured again. So I think this is another opportunity to kind of get some game reps and get myself back into it again when the preseason starts, when it really matters.
What has been your focus during the offseason this summer? What areas have you been working on?
I think I get bigger and stronger. I think I've gotten a little thicker in the legs and the upper body, and working on being stable on the ice, as well as obviously just maintaining my shot and using it as a weapon a lot.
Like how important is your two-way game in the end with your direction towards the NHL? Like, you're obviously you can score, but
Yeah.
everybody has to get that game together. Is that a focus for you too?
Yeah, for sure. I think my details have gone better every single year, and I think that's definitely something that I try to put in my game more naturally instead of worrying about it. So I think my details are getting better and better, and hopefully can carry through the preseason and
On that note, I guess it's not about scoring fancy goals at this tournament. It's proving some of the two-way stuff that Mark was
Yeah, it's
talking
definitely
about.
playing the right way, because I'm definitely going to play a lot more minutes and everything, and counting on more of a leadership role now, and definitely want to put that expectation and pressure on myself to do well and play well out there.
What are your first impressions of Fraser Minten?
He's a big boy, definitely young. It's good to see another young guy come upon. He's definitely a big body, and look forward to playing with him.
Nick, with some of the forwards departing in the offseason and Jason Spezza retiring, does it feel like there's a greater opportunity to win a job at camp than in previous years?
I mean, again, every year you look at the roster, you see what guys are. It is what it is. I'm not going to go and say, yeah, this is my, every year I would say this. Every year I'm trying to make the team. Even when I was drafted 3 years ago, I want to make the team. So My goal is obviously not go back to American. My goal is to play in the NHL like it is every year. Nothing's changed. So as far as the chances of making the team, that's up to Kiefer. But for me, I got to put myself in the best position to do so.
What's it like summer training with your brother? Like, how much do you guys push each other?
Oh, we push each other a lot. I mean, it's good competing against him. Doing a lot of one-on-ones with him because he's a bigger body, and just hanging around with him and learning the ins and outs of the business with his contract too. So it's nice to get that aspect and stuff. But yeah, it was a good training with him.
How's he holding up?
Good. I mean, he's just his agent's taking care of it. So.
Nick, how much weight have you put on? Can you say?
It's fluctuated. I think I put him on. I don't even know if I put on a couple pounds, but at one point in the summer I was weighing about 185, and then I kind of simmered down because, I think the main focus sometimes with smaller guys you got to add weight, but I think for me I just added thickness, added more of a foundation, and I'm happy with my weight. I don't want to be too heavy, too light.
Strength-wise, are you peaked out more than you ever were?
Yeah, 100%. I think I did better in my bike test than I've ever done before. So my numbers have definitely significantly gone through the roof, and definitely build that build I wanted.
Crush the bike test. That's why he's Thick Nick. Crushing bike test. And he got thicker down in the legs, so hopefully it'll improve his speed, powerful skating, and also upper body can improve that shot, allow him to get off defenders potentially, and even muck it up in the corners. Because one of the other things that I took from that is, and I thought it was a really good question, I can't recall who asked it, but it may have been Mark Masters who said, are you going to be focused on maybe, as opposed to scoring beautiful goals, focused on challenging yourself perhaps to make sure that you play that two-way game? And he said, yes, I'm going to be focusing on, the details of the game as opposed to just going out there and trying to light up the scoreboard. And I thought that was a pretty sound answer, and something that I like to hear at least.
It's a pretty mature answer, right? From a young guy that, when he got drafted, his first season in the OHL after getting drafted, he puts up over 50 goals.
Yeah.
Right. And so everyone's like, oh, what a steal of a player to get him second round, a guy that can score at will. But it's clear that the Leafs development path is just, we can't have a guy that's thinking just about scoring goals, especially higher up in the lineup. You have to have some semblance of a defensive game. And let's not forget with Robertson, he's dealt with injuries, and I guarantee part of that has to do with his size, right? Yeah. So that it benefits him in many ways to not only improve his defensive game, but to get himself stronger so that he can be that defensive player. Because it is a little bit tougher for the smaller players to be that type of defensive, asset, because they don't usually have the size that some of these bigger wingers tend to have.
Yeah, really quickly before we move on in our list, was there anything else in that interview that stuck out to you?
I think it's always nice to hear him talk about like things with his brother, and that I think he has arguably the best role model to kind of follow, right, with his path to where he wants to go. So
yeah, if he wants to score 40 goals, that'd be nice, right? Following his brother's footsteps and be a 40-goal scorer like Jason Robertson is out in Dallas. I do want to say that's just kind of happened to be beside me as this was happening. But today I was at my card shop and I ended up actually buying a little Nick Robertson rookie card out of the Metal Universe. There's weird. Anyway. But yeah, funny, I saw it and I was like, I'll pick that up. It's only a couple of bucks. And I was like, yeah, you know what? If he can become a 40-goal scorer like his brother, I think the value of this card would go up. So for the couple of bucks that I spent on it, I'll say it was well worth it. And good luck to old Nick Robertson. All right, why don't we take one more quick break? When we come back, we'll get to the rest of our list, players 2 through 5. For guys who we're looking forward to, our players to watch at this weekend's rookie tournament in Traverse City for the Maple Leafs. It all starts tonight, but we'll get to the rest of our players to watch on the other side. To listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We are your hosts here at Locked On Leafs, and starting Monday, we're back to 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday, each and every day. We'll be doing some pre-game previews. We'll be doing some post-game analysis, some trade talk. We'll keep doing our mailbag segments, cosign, no signs, obviously, but it's back to 5 days a week, content overload, all pertaining to your Toronto Maple Leafs. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to us, whether it's on YouTube or it's via wherever you get your podcast from, or both. Ideally, you could do both. If you are on the go, listen to podcasts. If you're at home and you want something passive, maybe you're a YouTube person. But the support would be much, much appreciated. All right, Dave, let's get to the rest of our list here. So Nick Robertson was both of our number ones. Who is your number two?
All right. We're going on the blue line here. Oh, don't look too far.
Oh, you spoiled it. You spoiled your number three.
That's okay. It's okay. Number two, sorry. William Villeneuve. I was when you look at the blue line, there's not a lot of big names there. So I just pretty much went with the most intriguing one of the list there. And the other reason too is we know the status of the Leafs right side of the blue line. There really is not much there on the prospect pipeline other than Topi Niemela. I would have Villeneuve probably second among right shot defensemen on the prospect ranking if I was to rank kind of the defenseman there. So like he had a great season. I just realized I made a typo in the graphics, so do not
He didn't play for Cam Loops for sure. But.
Yeah. So I did it right for I had him and Fraser Minton mixed up. That's what happened there. But I'm again, for him, the important thing is he's a big body. He's played in big games, and that's what I think attracts me about him as a defenseman. It's not even the offensive play, because that's not really what I think the Leafs were looking at when they drafted him. For Niemela, of course it is, but not for Villeneuve. So curious to see how he plays, and against the top. Arguably, he'll be going up against the top lines for the other teams this weekend.
Yeah, definitely will. And fresh off of a Memorial Cup victory, and he's starting his pro career with the Marlies this year. Definitely somebody to be watching. He does come up on my list, but a little bit later. Coming up number 2 on my list is going to be Fraser Minton, the player that you mentioned before, the Kamloops Blazers. He was the team's second round pick this past season. 38th overall last year in 67 games, 20 goals, 55 points, but he's more of a two-way guy. So I'm excited to see if, that two-way stature really shines through in this tournament. Are we going to see him being, getting dirty in the dirty areas? Is he going to be getting his assignments right? Is he going to be that defensive player that, we kind of think he's going to be, like a third, fourth liner type of guy, a bottom six defensive player who has a little bit of pop that can put the puck in the back of the net. So I think Fraser Minton definitely is one of the guys who I'll be looking forward to. And I think we should note also that, Matthew Nyes is not at this tournament, and, some of their other bigger prospects who are either overseas, their seasons have already kind of started in overseas in Europe, in the NCAA as well, which is why Nyes is not there. But Minton is another one of those prospects who's, up there, top 5 prospect for the Maple Leafs. So we'll always be intrigued to see what he's all about. And he's kind of the fresh blood, right? He was the first pick in the draft this year for the Maple Leafs in the second round. So definitely someone who I'm excited to get a chance to see with my own two eyes. Who do you got at number 3?
So number 3, we are looking at a forward. I kind of teased it a little bit when I almost scrolled too far down, but is our boy Nick Abruzzese. I think when it was a little disappointing that we didn't see him. The Leafs tried to give him a little more rope to see what he could do, because I understand you're bringing him into the NHL for the first time. You don't want to put too much on his plate. I'm curious to see what the plan is for him, because this is somebody the Leafs have wanted to bring to the NHL for a little bit. They believe he has, great versatility as a center on the wing. I want to see what's the plan for this guy. So I want to see how he does against players his own age, because we saw him at the NHL level. Now let's see how he does against players he should be having a little more success against.
You see him as an American leaguer for the most part this season, right?
I do. I it would make the most sense. I don't want to see him, barely playing fourth line, or, not getting any. If he's just playing even strength fourth line minutes, that does nothing for him. Play him in the American Hockey League top line. I would say he's probably should be in the top 6, probably early top line, depending on how the lineup shakes out. But yeah, no, you have to play him. You have to keep him on that right development path, and playing him in the, not playing him, having him sit in the press box does not work.
Agreed. All right, number 3 on my list is William Villeneuve, a player who we both spoke about quite a bit already. So I guess I won't say much more. But just the fact that he's somebody who's coming off a very successful junior career in the QMJHL, just won a Memorial Cup last season, had 2 helpers in the clinching game of the Memorial Cup final. And, coming off a year, 56 points in 64 games, didn't play for Kamloops. He was in the queue. I don't know why I'm blanking on the team that he played. St. John's. Played for St. John's, right? Yeah. And so I'm excited to get a glimpse at William Villeneuve with the Maple Leafs, and I think he's going to be a part of this blue line for the Marlies this year, and probably for a couple of years before factoring into the Maple Leafs. But he's somebody, one of the very few players, I suppose, at this tournament who I believe have what it takes to really establish themselves as longtime NHLers, and I think William Villeneuve is one of those. So getting a chance to see him, young talent like that. Like you said before, he's one of their top defensive prospects behind Topi Niemela, arguably the top defensive prospect behind him at this point. I'm excited to see what he's got as well at this tournament. Number 4, Dave.
All right. It's our boy, Fraser Minton. I think with what, and I'll just to add what you were kind of talking about with him, he's playing top line with Nick Robertson. They're putting him in that position right away. They're not shying away with what they want. Basically, they're saying, here you go. Here's top line minutes with our arguably our top prospect. Let's see what you can do. I like that. I want to see how he does in those offensive situations. We know that he's got a pretty good two-way game, and that's something he's going to continue to work on. I want to see how he plays when, again, the spotlight's going to be on that top line. That's the line I'm going to be looking forward to watching the most at this tournament.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, it's got my number 1 and number 2 player, and it's got your 2 of your top 4 players on that top line, right? So yeah, definitely that's going to be the top line that we're going to be keeping track here on the Locked On Leafs pod. And I would imagine most Leaf fans will be keeping track of that one. All right, my number 4, Dave. I got a goaltender coming in at number 4. It's going to be Keith Petruzzelli, who I thought had an outstanding season last year in the ECHL. Obviously, you look at 23 games, won 16 of them, won 16, 6-1, a 201 goals against, and a 927 save percentage. Didn't quite have as much success when he moved up to the Marlies. Just 5 games, though. He went 3-1 at 312 goals against and a 902 save percentage. But Petruzzelli is somebody who at last year's tournament really made a name for himself and earned himself an AHL contract. So he's technically one of those Maple Leafs that's on an AHL contract. But I think Petruzzelli is one of those guys who potentially could be a player that blossoms into, an NHL backup. He has the size. He's 6'5", 185 pounds. He's a former 3rd-round pick. He went the college route where he was spectacular in Quinnipiac. His last 2 years, he was a 201 goals against and a 920 save percentage. His second last year, and then his final season of college hockey, he had a 189 goals against and a 926 save percentage, and won 17 hockey games for Quinnipiac, which is a top tier squad in the NCAA. So his first year pro last year went pretty well, I would say, in the ECHL. We've seen a lot of goaltenders. It's goalies typically not typically, but you'll see it way more often with goaltenders where they spend time in the ECHL, then the AHL, and then go on to the NHL. It's not, as uncommon to see ECHL goaltenders flourish, unlike sometimes forwards and defensemen. You'll only get a handful of guys make it out of the second level of the minor leagues. I like Keith Petruzzelli. I think he's one of those guys who could potentially, like I said, maybe turn into a prospect, perhaps 23 years old. He's got a couple of years, but potentially be a backup for this team at some point. So he's a player who I'll be excited to watch. How much has he grown from last year? Is he going to be that much better in his second season as a pro hockey player in this Maple Leafs organization?
Yeah, you need to have as many, throw as many lines out and hope you catch something.
Yeah, I'll also mention this. The reason why Petruzzelli is the goaltender that I'm most excited to be watching, is mainly because Dennis Hildeby isn't going to be there, the goalie that they took in the fourth round this year, the Swedish goaltender. He's not at the tournament. So to me, Petruzzelli is the top tender that they have at the tourney. So I think that's why he's on this list over a guy like Hildeby, who I would have more intrigue in if he were there.
Yeah, and the Leafs are trying right now. We saw it really with their offseason plan is try to get cast as many lines to grab as much fish as you can. Hope something bites. Right,
they're all dart throws, buddy. Just another dart throw that they have, either AHL signings or PTOs. It was just a lot of dart throws where they're trying to fix the goalie position and trying to fix the depth in the organizational goal depth at the goaltending position. And maybe Petruzzelli can turn out to be something. All right, number 5 on your list, Dave.
All right, we're going with Ty Voigt.
I like it.
We didn't get to see him at the World Juniors. I was disappointed that he wasn't on that roster. And
Yeah.
I thought, it was a little disappointing considering he had a pretty good year in Sarnia, right? 80 points in 67 games. It's not bad considering, he's not a high draft pick either. So
right.
I want to see again, when you look at, a guy that gets picked a little bit later, but is a top scorer in juniors, there's clearly areas of the game that the development team wants to see him work on. So I want to see him have a presence. He doesn't have to score a bunch. He doesn't have to, but I want to see him have a presence. I want him to, show that he was worthy of, of taking a flyer on, right? And so, yeah, so he's definitely another player that I thought was going to get beyond the World Junior teams for the U.S. Didn't make it. So we'll have to wait and watch him at the rookie tournament.
Hey, maybe the Americans would have won a medal if they had Ty Voigt there. Just saying. Number 5 on my list is Alex Steeves, the third member of the top line for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I have 3 of those, all 3 of those players in my top 5. He's someone who also had a cup of coffee in the NHL last year, but played most of the season with the Toronto Marlies, 23 goals, 46 points in his first full season as a pro hockey player coming out of the college ranks once again. But, I think last year I recall Alex Steeves absolutely torching this tournament before injuring his shoulder, if you recall. He was really starting to not only put himself on the map with, the Marlies, but people were starting to think, hey, maybe Alex Steeves could push for a fourth line gig. And then he got hurt, obviously, and he eventually, got an opportunity with the main club, and it was okay. He did all right, nothing to write home about, but I think maybe a full season of being healthy, he comes back, another healthy camp for him, or I guess it'd be his first healthy camp, and for much of the same reasons with Nick Robertson, kind of get him into game shape so that he's up to speed and ready to go for main camp, where I think, again, where there's going to be internal battle for some fourth line positions. I think Alex Steeves is one of those guys who will be there. And it kind of all starts with a great prospect tournament, rookie camp, whatever you want to call it. So Alex Steves is definitely one of those players who I will be keeping these two peepers on throughout the weekend.
And I think, I just remember everyone talking about him last year at development camp. Haley Wickenheiser was the biggest fan.
Yes. Yes.
That's big considering her role as, the head of player development. So,
right.
There are quite a few guys here that feel like they're going to be trying to prove something at this tournament. And there's only so many jobs available, right, in camp. So any chance you get to have a good little foot in the door, take that opportunity. This is one for them, right? I know some people say, "Oh, it's a rookie tournament; it's not a big deal." For these guys, it means a lot to them, right? They're all trying to battle for a spot either in the NHL or for the Marlies' sake. There's got to be a little more competition, right? You got to see these guys. Like the Marlies haven't exactly been a stellar team. I want to see this Marlies team actually be a contender. I want to see them come playoff time, and we're talking about some of these guys having big performances in the AHL playoffs, because that's what happened when the Leafs prospects were at their best. They were among the tops in the AHL. So there's a lot to look forward to here, especially with guys who have already had that experience either at the NHL level or a lot of time with the Marlies.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be an important tournament for a lot of these players to establish themselves. And dude, first impressions last, right? This will be a lot of these guys' kind of first impressions, I suppose, especially a Fraser Minton and a Brandon Lazowski, who's a player we hadn't mentioned, but he was a player who was selected, I think, in the 7th round this past season. Those guys are going to get their first crack, their first look in a Maple Leafs uniform going head to head against other teams. So it's going to be an important week for a lot of these young guys who are trying to establish themselves in the organization. Any final thoughts, or is there anybody else who, like an honorable mention, that you toyed with putting on your list that we hadn't talked about yet?
Ooh, that's a good question. Just because of his pure size, Curtis Douglas.
And he's been talked about by like Kyle Dubas a little bit too, right?
Yeah, he's kind of in. There's like a group of 3. It's Robertson, it's Steves, and it's Douglas. That seems to be like Anderson. Like those guys, like Kyle Dubas has constantly said that we want to give these guys opportunities. It's funny because I don't really consider Curtis Douglas a rookie in my eyes, but I guess, hey, if he meets the criteria to be at the tournament, you get these guys as much ice time, competitive games as you can. So yeah, he's another one. I think it will be hard to not notice him on the ice.
Yeah, I'd say so. Weighing in at 6'9", 238 pounds. I think you'll notice Curtis Douglas when he's out there. And that's what's so intriguing about him, right? Like that's the size that we got. We could probably take this graphic down now and have up here for have us up here for the last couple minutes. Yeah, right. Our hideous faces realistically, but it's what it is. But Curtis Douglas, 6'9", 240 pounds. Like he's basically a taller, he's like Dustin Byfuglien, basically, when he's out there. But he's the height of Zdeno Chara, right? And he's a centerman. So you could fall in love with the size. And we all know the Maple Leafs need some size. But he's also got to, be able to play the game of hockey at a high level. And according to everything that I've read and according to all the interviews I've heard from development staff to, the general manager, Kyle Dubas, they believe that Curtis Douglas took big strides last year and will be one of those players that will be kind of, forcing his way into a potential role in the NHL. He had 34 points last year in 67 games. So they're hoping that he's a guy who can kind of come in and potentially fight for a role. And maybe with some injuries, a potential call-up option for the Maple Leafs as a fourth liner should that happen. And injuries always happen, so they want to have as much depth as possible. So yeah, that's a good name. That's a good name to mention for sure. I think we'll leave it there because we pretty well mentioned most of the players that that I wanted to. I talked slightly about Lazowski, who was another one of those guys. You had Voigt on your list. Abruzzese was on your list. We both had Villanova. We both had Minton and Robertson. I had Steves, and then I also had Petruzzelli. So, it's a good list of roughly 10 guys that you and I are excited about to be able to watch at this weekend's tournament. It all starts tonight. Leafs. Stars. Again, you can watch it on the Toronto Maple Leafs app, or you can watch the opponent's feed up on YouTube. Puck drop will be at 6:30. Excited for it, buddy. I am excited for it. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast, though. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like if you would. Leave a comment down below. Some of the players who you're excited to see at the Prospect Tournament this upcoming weekend. And that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Have a good weekend, folks. Enjoy all the games. We'll be back to wrap up the weekend. But before we do, Dave, there is something you need to do for us. There is something. Maybe we do it as the outro, the little extra outro. Let's hear from you now. Here's our guy, Dave Morassutti, performing. What's the song name again? Make Your Dreams? No, I Make Your Dreams.
You Make My Dreams.
Hey, You Make My Dreams by Hall & Oates. The Leafs goal song performed by our guy, Dave Morassutti, on his piano that sits next to his bed for whatever reason.
My desk. This is my studio. It's
Oh.
where I come to jam. And just for you, Mike. Go on.
Let's go. There he is.
I just love the song. It's a banger.
David Morassutti / David Beethoven.
Nah.
No, David Mozart? Are you a David Mozart guy?
I have played Mozart before. It's not easy.
No, I would imagine. I would imagine so. I would imagine so. Good stuff, buddy. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Enjoy the games. We'll be back on Monday to recap it all. Again, we start back up 5 days a week. It all starts on Monday. Training camp starts up on Monday. Everyone's pouring into the city. So Monday will be a can't miss episode as we go over the tournament and then we talk about some of the big storylines heading into camp, which all begins next week. So we'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.